One other story, and this is sticking with Kroger, sticking with your reporting in the Cincinnati Business Courier. Kroger announced it is buying Giant Eagle, which is a grocery chain based out of Pittsburgh and has a pretty big footprint in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It's actually the first acquisition of a supermarket company that Kroger has done in more than a decade. It was 2015 when they bought Roundy's, which was based in Milwaukee and had Pick and Save and Mariano's stores. That was a little bit smaller deal. Actually involved more stores, but dollar-wise it was less. But yeah, this is $1.7 billion acquisition, 1.65. And it brings in 197 stores to Kroger. As you said, Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania are really the biggest stronghold, and Northeast Ohio is right there with it. It gets Kroger back in Cleveland for the first time in about 30 years. That's when they pulled out of Cleveland. It gets them into Pennsylvania in a big way, which they really haven't had a significant presence ever. And then Giant Eagle has a few other stores in surrounding areas, Indiana, Maryland, and West Virginia. There are not a lot of those stores there, though. So there is not a ton of overlap. That Kroger officials said Columbus is the area where there's the biggest overlap, and they will need to sell some stores there to satisfy regulatory concerns and make sure it's not a monopoly. But otherwise, it's in pretty good shape as far as adding new markets to Kroger rather than overlapping what it has existing.
Yeah, this is the first big move that Kroger has really made in terms of an acquisition since that Albertsons deal fell apart, and a lot of that was based on regulatory concerns. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt about some other things that may have derailed that plan that are still sort of playing out in court. Is there a concern because Kroger isn't in Northeast Ohio anymore? Your article in the Courier talked about that was centered around issues with workers' unions. Is that anticipated of being an issue now with this expansion back into Northeast Ohio?
I don't think so. I mean, Kroger has operated as a union company for years and no doubt will continue to, but they don't think that will be an issue. But you're right about the Albertsons deal. That was such a huge deal. That would have combined Kroger, which is the biggest operator of traditional supermarkets in the country, with Albertsons, based in Boise, Idaho, but it's a mostly national player. It covers about half to 2/3 of the country and is the second biggest operator of traditional supermarkets. So you had a situation where there was a lot of overlap in a lot of big markets, Phoenix, Denver, the West Coast, Seattle, Portland, a lot of areas, Los Angeles, that had huge amounts of overlap. Kroger had planned to sell 579 stores.
That's crazy.
From that deal. I mean, in this case, we're probably talking about a handful, maybe a dozen, probably less than 2 dozen, I would guess, that would have to be sold. I mean, it is such a dramatically different scale that I don't think that there are going to be significant issues with the Federal Trade Commission, although they do have to review this and give their stamp of approval. So the deal is expected to close next year. And that is a result of the process of going through the regulatory procedures. But at this point, Kroger and analysts do not seem to think that will be a big issue.
Yeah, Giant Eagle, it really struck me. I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and I'm familiar with Giant Eagle, but in terms of the scope of how many stores Giant Eagle has, really doesn't compare to how big Albertsons was and what a big deal that attempted merger was. Steve, thanks so much. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Really stellar reporting. You've got your finger on the pulse of business stuff in this city.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks very much. Steve Watkins with the Cincinnati Business Courier. Again, going over Kroger and P&G pulling out of their sponsorship with the LPGA Tour that was here. That is still here as of right now, waiting on the LPGA to make an announcement about the future of the Queen City Championship. And then Kroger is buying Giant Eagle. I don't know if it's going to get any reward points for that, but we'll have to see how that works out with the Fuel Perks program.